Welcome back to CHGO Bears After Dark. I've been away on vacation, but I'm back in studio with you fine people. No Corey Wooten tonight. He's got a little bit of family stuff. We'll get our schedules lined up here. Next week might even have a little bit of a surprise show here sometime this week, pending an interview request. But joining us here tonight is the editor-in-chief and one of the top dogs on Bears Twitter when it comes to great Bears information and video breakdown and everything else. And he's joining the show once again. That is Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of DaBearsBlog. How you doing tonight, Robert?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. I mean, what an unbelievable Bears offseason this has been, right? Like, I don't know how you guys over at CHGO have been, but for the last, Greg, what, 5, 6, 7 years of my life, we have just been constantly talking ourselves into whatever team we're about to look at. But this offseason kind of feels like we get to relax and say, well, no, we know what team we're looking at. We don't know what the results will be. There are plenty of question marks, but we know who is a question mark. We know who's not. And we don't have to talk ourselves into Marcus Wheaton or Dontrell Inman or Darnell Mooney as a wide receiver 1 or all sorts of things we've done offseason after offseason saying maybe if all this breaks right, we'll be 9-8. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. No, there's a lot of hype. Well, we have hype. I was just with my good friend. We were golfing this afternoon, and he was like, I haven't been this excited in a season in I don't know how long. And I was like, well, last offseason was the last time we were this excited. I mean, Bears fans always can find a way to get hyped this time of year and write checks that the team may or may not cash, in the regular season. It does feel that this season the hype is a little more real, a little more justified when you see the national people starting to buy into it. Because before it used to be Bears fans yelling at the national people, no, you don't understand.
Right.
You're the idiots. We're the smart ones. They're going to be good. We promise. We've never lied to you before. But now the national media is buying into what's going on. The local media is buying in. The fans are buying into what's going on. HBO is already out there filming for Hard Knocks. That's typically a sign of a team that has at least some intrigue one way or the other. So, it's exciting. And there's no question that we've had a lot of fun off seasons. The year the Bears got Julius Peppers, the year the Bears traded for Jay Cutler, the Bears traded for Khalil Mack right before the 2018 season. That season was a lot of fun. Maybe one of my favorite seasons as a Bears fan ever. But this is arguably maybe the most explosive offseason in terms of all the additions they made. DeAndre Swift, a guy like that just gets completely lost in the dust. People barely talk about him because everyone's excited about the passing weaponry, even though he's included in that as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, another example name that I want to throw out there. Okay, so for those who don't know me, I'm a capital N nerd. I'm going to try to do as much film study as I will statistics. But coming out of the draft, Greg, I was definitely one of the people that thought folks oversold Cole Kmet for a long while. But last year, dude was the real deal. Like, I'm sure you saw it too. He's snapping off his routes at the top of his stem, looking like a much stronger route runner than he has in all of his years in Chicago. Not to mention, as a physical force with the ball in the air, he came down with more contested catches last year than I'm pretty sure he had in all 3 of his years combined. And I mean, everybody will point out, what was it, the catch he had 2 years ago, one-handed up the seam against, I honestly couldn't tell you who, but last year's Tyson Bagent TD catch where he just pulled the ball down over the top of a defender was something that we hadn't seen from a guy like Kmet in a long time. And you don't see his name mentioned at all because everybody's focused on the 3 major receivers. This Bears team is in a position, and I can't believe we're saying this, Greg, and knock on wood, I will.
He knocked on wood and then he muted his mic. That's how hard he knocked on woods. You're still muted. And that's okay. But no, you're 100% right while you get your mic in order. But no, I don't know what you knocked. You must have knocked your whole computer.
I knocked the whole mic out. But it's funny because like we see Don Burr in the chat here talking about like Detroit mic drop. But if you asked me, Greg, right now, okay, so the Bears and the Lions both lose their wide receiver one. First question, who did both teams lose? Asking you.
Wait, say that again because Don Burr was distracting me.
Both teams lose their wide receiver one, Detroit and Chicago.
Right.
So who does each team lose?
I don't know. You're confusing me here. We lost both wide receiver ones.
As in both wide receiver ones on each team get hurt
Right.
over the course of the season.
I see what you're saying. If DJ Moore goes down or if
DJ
Amon-Ra St. Brown
and
goes
Amon-Ra,
down,
and then measure
like,
the wide receiver rooms
right,
after that.
Right.
Which does
team
Detroit
would
have stepping up compared to Chicago, who they've got either Keenan Allen or a top 10 wide receiver choice. Like you're pretty disaster proof in the weaponry state, which I cannot believe that I'm saying out loud, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's maybe 3 teams you could argue that have similar trio of top end wide receiver, especially if Rome Odunze ends up being the guy that we all hope he can be. But when you draft a wide receiver in the top 10, Kevin White's aside, you're typically looking for that Julio Jones type. And that's the hope with Rome Odunze. So, it'll be interesting to see. And I see your comment, Drew Black. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But, it is exciting overall. I mean, that's basically, the synopsis of the entire thing. I mean, when we were going through the draft process, we had you on and, what was there anything that surprised you, whether it was with the Bears and coming back to get Austin Booker, or if it's something else around the league, another player that you really had your eye on? I know you did a lot of homework going into that stretch, and it really did feel like a lot of things fell the Bears' way. Was there anything for you that stood out, whether it's Bears specific or not?
So I understand that everybody under the sun mocked Caleb Williams, as expected, and Rome Odunze to Chicago. But I will not stop pointing out, Greg, that I can't believe Rome actually fell to Chicago.
Right.
We see in interviews after the fact that Poles called Atlanta and asked them if they were comfortable trading back to number 9 so Chicago could go up to number 8. That's what I expected. Every time I did a mock with different analysts, we kept seeing Rome go at lowest number 8 because it just didn't make sense. He was the best player there until Atlanta chooses to take a quarterback. And that's a wild card choice that you can't see coming. But because of that, Greg, up until then, Rome was the BPA and he falls to 9 and the Bears scoop him up. And I mean, after that, I don't say this often, but the rest of the draft was gravy. Like at that point, you're drafting 100%. You're drafting deliberate depth.
It could have just had 2 picks, and
really
we would feel great going into this season. I mean, obviously Austin Booker, we had him in studio here last week. That's certainly awesome. Exciting and intriguing. And if he were to work out and develop quicker than, typical, 5th round picks do, that could really help the Bears this year. And I think he's got a lot of upside potential. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, 1, 2. The rest is all just the cherry on top. And, it is interesting to watch that video. The Bears had their, 1920 football drive, video where they released, and they left that part out that Poles was trying to trade up to 8, but there was a little tidbit. If you go back to watch the 1920 football drive, there's a moment where Kevin Warren hugs Ryan Poles and he goes, "I know it must have been hard to be patient, but I'm proud of you." And that was a little before this Roku video came out that showed that he did indeed make a call to Atlanta. Ryan Poles, that's I'm saying, that they did try to trade up. And I think in that moment, it really showed just how important Ian Cunningham is to this room, because Poles does have an aggressive button. And, like for all those times, like I thought there were things that Ryan Pace did well. And then the thing that I didn't like was he didn't have a great poker face. When he really wanted something, he was going to do whatever it
Right.
took to get it, whether it's trade up for Anthony Miller, trade up for Mitch Trubisky, trade a 4th-round pick for Nick Foles, because you don't want him to wait to just be released so you can get a guy like that just off the market, on your own. He did that so many times that it buried the Bears, and they didn't have any draft equity. And Poles, I think, he goes both ways. He shows a lot of patience at times, especially in contract negotiations. He lets, the market fall to him. Yannick Ngakoue right before the season. He's not going to force the issue, and he'll probably do the same to add to the defensive line here this year. But trading for Chase Claypool, making the move for Montez Sweat, you missed one, you hit the next. So now you're trying to trade from 9 to 8 to get, make sure you get your guy in Rome Odunze. Hey, I always respect you want to go get your guy. But as much as we joke like, hey, Ryan Pace, thanks for helping us out one more time and not taking the trade, it did show that Poles was getting ready to make a mistake and move up to 8 for essentially no reason.
Which is so funny, Greg, because if they had moved up to number 8 and they traded away a future 4th, we'd all be high-fiving on podcasts like this saying they got Rome, the 4th doesn't matter, we're good. And I would do that because Rome is that kind of player.
Right.
Like, it's so funny, Greg, because on one hand, everybody wants to talk about how, and I think it's awesome. I'm so excited that Ryan Poles was patient. But Ryan Poles' patience 2 years ago landed him Velus Jones when, me personally, call me speculative, I think they thought they were going to get Alec Pierce at 71, and then Pierce got drafted in the 50s, and that plan was over before it ever started. So patience can put you in situations where you just don't get any of the guys that you wanted. And like everybody was saying in the draft room, kudos to Ryan Poles for being steely stoned enough to hang in there and make it all the way to 9. But I don't think it works without Atlanta being primed for a quarterback, because it also wouldn't surprise me, Greg, if there were at least a couple of offers that got sent to Atlanta with much bigger trade packages.
Exactly. That's the fair point is, Ryan doesn't know if other teams are trying to move up to 8. Ryan doesn't know that Atlanta's staying to take Michael Penix, which is why he gave the face he did in the Bears 1920 football drive, where they show that. And like Robert Lee says here in the chat, it's always good to have a little luck on your side.
Absolutely.
Too. Exactly. And that's exactly what it is when you watch not just Atlanta, but the picks even before that, JC Latham and, everything else just kind of everything fell into place perfectly, which it never happens like that for the Bears. So I know we're kind of, rewinding back to the draft, but like I said, when I was talking to Robert, and I appreciate you coming on such short notice, we had you on, in the draft process leading up to it. Now we're here. The dust is settled. We're through OTAs. We're through mini camp, rookie camp, the draft, HBO Hard Knocks. There's been so many things. So I kind of want to give you the floor to cover it all. And, on the other side of our little commercial break here in a moment, we'll talk a little bit, you'll get into, because you do such a great job of breaking down the tape. And I definitely want to hear what new homework you've done on this Shane Waldron offense and what you see this all now that we know all the pieces and Waldron's been here. You've heard some different interviews, so we can get a little bit of an idea of your expectation for this offense going into the season. And then also obviously Matt Eberflus and how important it is for him, because it's money on the table time. He's got a roster in front of him. No more excuses. Your defense took a big leap in the second half of last season. Situationally, I think he's got a lot to prove still. And then overall, Caleb Williams is still your responsibility too. The buck stops with you as the head coach. So I think there is an interesting dynamic here, because it does almost feel 1985-ish in terms of you've got one coaching staff coaching the offense and an entire other coaching staff coaching the defense. And they do kind of feel like separate entities. You had Buddy Ryan versus Mike Ditka, and they were like strangling each other in the locker room. I don't think it's going to get like that with Waldron and Eberflus, who strike me as very, very nice people. So I don't see any strangling in our future, but it is interesting to see, how it truly does feel like two separate coaching staffs. But before we get into that, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our sponsors here. is BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and I'm a big proponent of organizations like this. The year is going by quick. We're already almost to camp. What's something you guys are proud of in 2024? What's something you want to accomplish this year? Obviously, I take a lot of pride in what we do here at home to raise our daughter, and I'm looking forward to her here getting into school here in a couple months, and she's up to 80 words she can identify. We got to get her to that 100 mark, but life goes fast, and it's important to take a moment to celebrate your wins, make adjustments for the rest of the year. Therapy can help you take stock of your progress and set achievable goals for the next 6 months. It's always helpful to learn positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma. I mean, this is, when you're talking about BetterHelp, it's not just people that, have, some kind of issue they're trying to work through. It's just something for every single person to kind of work through their day. It's just like working out at the gym. You got to work out your mind too, and make sure you're staying fresh there. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. So take a moment, visit betterhelp.com/CHGO today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/CHGO. And also, quickly, I definitely wanted to give another shout out here to Prize Picks. Prize Picks is one of our sponsors here. We love them very much. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 5 million members. It's the most fun and exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. You can make Prize Picks lineups in as little as 60 seconds. Prize Picks offers injury insurance so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So they take care of you. There's still NBA Finals. Hopefully can continue through here tonight. I'm rooting for Dallas to make this a series. But we'll see what happens. And so get in on Prize Picks and make your bets with them. But if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, Prize Picks has your back and will not count that as a loss. So they're taking care of the people. So download the app today and use code CHGO to make sure you get here. Make sure I get this right for you. Use CHGO for your first deposit match up to $100. That's Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. It's a lot easier than me getting through that ad read, which was a bit of a juggling act. So I did it. I'm shaking off the rust here. I haven't done a Bears show, Robert, in 2 weeks. So
it's your OTAs. You just gotta
so
get back
bizarre
in there.
to me.
Stretch.
It's just, come on. I get paid to go to Wrigley and party with the bleacher bums. This Bears show is totally new to me. So I appreciate everybody hanging through while I try to, give the love to the well-deserved love here to our sponsors. So Robert, like we were talking about before the break, it's a big, big year for this coaching staff, Matt Eberflus, but Shane Waldron as well. I mean, hey, sorry, it's your first year offense. Sorry, you're trying to build chemistry. Sorry, you have a rookie quarterback. You got to hit the ground running, Mr. Shane Waldron, because Bears fans and this team expect to be in the playoffs here right away. And Matt Eberflus, hey, you finally have a roster. No more excuses. Time, money on the table time for both these guys. So I'm going to ask you, we'll start here and then kind of branch our way into, kind of what we think about each coach and what the hurdles they're going to have to go through to meet the goals they want to meet. But who do you think kind of is, I'm not going to say the hot seat, but like, where are expectations higher? Is it for Matt Eberflus or is it for Shane Waldron?
So it's funny, right? Because I'm going to give you double answer. I think that expectations are higher for Waldron but the expectations that people have for Waldron are going to be easier to achieve than the expectations that people have for Eberflus, where they're assuming that this is going to be a top 10 defense. And until or unless the Bears add maybe 1 to 2 really solid defensive line pieces, Greg, that could be a tougher mark to achieve, which is why I think Matt Eberflus has more to prove than meets the eye. In the middle of the season, the Bears got really blitz heavy, or as blitz heavy as I've seen Matt Eberflus get in for basically his entire defensive coaching tenure, and it worked. Like, think about those 2 Lions games, think about that Browns game, think about some of the games they had smattered between. You had TJ Edwards, Kyler Gordon, and a couple other threats across the defense bursting through the line and creating actual pressure that the Bears really couldn't create otherwise. It generated a lot of the turnovers that we ended up seeing over the course of the rest of the middle of the season, which I think the Bears need to go back to. Near the end of the season, the blitzing tailed off for reasons that, to be very blunt, I don't really know why. I mean, maybe they just felt as if they weren't scared of Taylor Heineke. Maybe they thought that they needed that 7th man in coverage against Jordan Love. Not that that really helped. Whatever it could have been, the Bears tailed away from blitzing, and I would love to see Matt Eberflus stick with what they're doing. That it's called blitzing from depth, for what it's worth. So, if you can picture a football field, everybody, Matt Eberflus likes to disguise his blitzes by showing a standard cover 2, Tampa 2 template, or cover 3 in plenty of cases, and then blitz TJ Edwards from his 5-yard spot, or blitz Kyler Gordon from where he stands in the nickel, which I think worked a lot better than, Greg, if you make it clear who's blitzing and creep them up on the line, and then you go into some kind of anti-blitz check, and then you could punish the defense a little bit easier, as opposed to using these 2 guys in Gordon and in TJ Edwards that I think are really good at this. Both of them disguise their blitzes really well and have a quick enough first step where they can still reach their mark and create pressure on the quarterback that can turn into turnovers. But so if they stick with that, I think a lot of things can go well. Kevin Byard on the back end should be really handy. And I do think that, man, it's so funny, Greg. The media keeps talking about the Bears offense. I think the Bears back 7 goes almost underrated, where Jalen Johnson has at minimum 2 really solid years left. I love what Tyreek Stevenson brought us on the other side of the defense. And so then if Brisker can continue to be the force that he is in the run and as a pass rusher, the Bears have the ingredients to bake an awfully nice cake here. It's just a matter of, can Eric Washington and Matt Eberflus put their heads together to really create something special? Because if they can, I don't think it'll be long before the offense finds its legs. You want to say anything about that before I dive into the Shane Waldron stuff?
No, I'd say let's stick to Eberflus on the defensive side here, and then we'll give a lot more breathing room for the Waldron stuff, because I know a lot of fans are excited to hear the homework you've done on that side of it. So we'll spend some time there. So defensively, it is interesting when you talk about disguising blitzing and disguising looks for the quarterback. And, when Brisker was talking about, hey, I like Kevin Byard because, he can play down or he can play back. And when we had Eddie Jackson here, obviously really good talent. I was always a big Eddie Jackson fan, but he was your center fielder, and Brisker was your guy that's in the box. And for the most part, for most of my lifetime as a Bears fan, as they've tried to find this combination for their safeties, typically when it has worked out, it has been a defined role of, okay, Eddie Jackson, you're back here. Adrian Amos, you're down here. You're almost like your extra linebacker, right? And Mike Brown and those guys, but we've always had trouble having 2 good safeties at a time. Yep. Sometimes we have no good safeties, but even if we ever had 1, we could never get 2 that just felt like a good unit. What I find interesting about this, because I always kind of looked at it like, okay, you need that center fielder and you need that guy in the box. But Brisker, what he was saying was, hey, I kind of like that he can come up in the box as well, because now who we're playing against, the quarterback looking at us, they don't know if I'm coming down or if he's going to come down or if I'm staying back. So we're going to be able to disguise things a little more. So when you talk about TJ Edwards and those guys disguising things, I think the safety tandem this year has a better chance to be able to disguise some looks for the quarterback as well.
Oh, it's definitely all of them. I mean, okay, so do you remember Landon Collins when he played for Washington a little while
Mhm.
back? You
Yep.
remember how he was basically a linebacker that played safety and he was outstandingly good at it? I
Right.
think of Brisker pretty similarly, where I'm not trying to say Brisker is Landon Collins, but when you look at running backs, most of what we measure running backs' physicality against is when you hit a DB, are you going to fall forward? And Greg, nobody's falling forward against Jaquan Brisker. That guy is unbelievably physical, and he's a
Yep.
very difficult DB to block as long as, you're not talking about a 50 to 80 pound difference. That's where maybe you could block Jaquan Brisker, but at that point, you're not expecting a DB to be able to fight past that block. Anyways, the question mark I have with Brisker is, can he play in the deep half or the deep third as well as he thinks he can? I'm not so sure. But I don't say that to be a hater, because the way Matt Eberflus adjusted to that was a ton of cover 3 and cover 1, and it worked. This Bears defense has the talent within Jalen Johnson and Tyreek Stevenson to
Yep.
play a lot of man defense. And that's a good thing, because those disguises you're talking about, even if you're a primarily single high defense, or Brisker seemed as if he worked really well in the in cover 3, you'll call it a lurk role, where you're not all the way up on the line of scrimmage, but you're just about 10 yard. Think about the role. It's easiest, I think, if I point out a play. Do you remember when Jaquan Brisker almost picked off that pass against Tampa by chance?
Uh,
Okay,
I was
so
I was blinded with rage for
no
most of
worries.
that game.
No worries. It's a
Oh yeah,
so
no, 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 no. I do remember now
it's
because he
that
could have had
spot.
a pick six.
Yes, it's that spot 2 steps above where he lines up about 15 yards off the ball. Like, he drives in just a little and then basically sits over the middle of the field. That's an area where Brisker, I also think, is pretty instinctive and does a solid amount of damage. It's just those deep center field or the double, or what is it, split field half safety roles, where I don't love seeing Brisker in coverage, but hey, not everybody's great at everything, and that's all right. Like you're
Right.
talking about, though, I actually wonder. So I don't know how Tremaine Edmonds is going to play if the Bears' defensive line can't basically stop the run for him, because he's great when he's unblocked. He is not great when anybody blocks him. But we could see him benefit and basically get a ton of credit from how well everybody else is doing, because he's still one of the better coverage defenders in space. He's just. He got targeted a lot last year when the Bears defense was still kind of coming together. But
Mm-hmm.
this year, the hope is, Greg, I know you know this, that whereas last year you could tell this was a defense that had just lost their DC weeks into the season and a locker room in turmoil, this is a defense that we're hoping hits the ground running. Because another thing you didn't mention that I love about this, so we'll do the Shane Waldron breakdown after the next ad break. But if you remember the Play Callers series, it's a podcast series by Jordan Rodrigue about the Kyle Shanahan tree and how they raised up. One thing they talked about was ferocity of practices. And one thing I love about this current Bears team is that Caleb Williams has the opportunity to practice, whether he's doing 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 drills, against a defense that's better than a lot of the defenses he'll play in the regular season. And then that same comment applies to the other side of the ball, where the defense gets to go up in one-on-ones, especially the DBs, against receivers that are better by and large against than a lot of the receivers
Yep.
they'll match up against. And my hope is this means that we see an unusually sharp set of performances by both Waldron and Eberflus as they hit the ground ready, as opposed to, as I know you've seen, some of the performances we get in September where it's clear the Bears pretty much weren't prepared to hit the ground running. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yep. No, and reading Courtney Cronin's, little piece, I know that was making its ways around Bears Twitter this morning, like where Tremaine Edmonds was talking about, Caleb Williams fooled them a little bit with his eyes, and found openings by using his eyes to deceive the defense. That's the kind of when you talk about a game of inches, you've got to be able to do little things like that to get your guys open and make plays as a quarterback. So,
And this is, and to that point, this is when you have to practice it. You're going to see reports. You should see reports of Caleb Williams throwing interceptions. If he was a rookie that hit the NFL playing against a defense like this and he never threw interceptions, That would be unbelievable because the speed difference from college football to the professional league is so radical and even wilder, Greg. The more all 22 I watch, the more that game of inches, oh man, you have no idea. Like you're trying to earhole, they call it, a linebacker. You're trying to put that ball just over his shoulder, sometimes not even out of reach, just on his other shoulder where
Yep.
he physically can't get back to it. And if that throw is a half second off or it's 2 feet too far, it's going to get picked. But you
Yep.
need to throw that pick in OTAs so that you understand how to earhole the Titans linebacker in week 1.
Right.
Or to fast forward after that, how to earhole the Packers linebacker in week 11. There's a
Yep.
piece of this that, like you're talking about, it's what you should be listening for is that Caleb Williams is trying a lot of these advanced techniques. You
Yep.
shouldn't expect it to all be there, but the fact that he's trying to work out the kinks with the whole package is what you're looking for, as opposed to trying to hit like a baseline level of performance and scale up from there. Just take on the whole enchilada and figure out how to eat it.
Well, you know me, I love my enchiladas and I love the Taco Bell cuisine, but it is exciting. We're going to talk about the offense here in a second. Thank you once again to Robert Schmitz coming on here and dropping this knowledge. We're going to do a little more discussion here in a moment about Shane Waldron's offense, but before we do, want to give a shout out over here to Ray CDJR. When it comes to finding your next vehicle, make Ray CDJR your number 1 draft pick this June. Shop Chryslers, Dodge, Jeeps, and Rams at Ray CDJR in Fox Lake. And during the Make the Summer event, find the perfect vehicle and score huge savings too. For a limited time, lease the new 2024 Jeep Wrangler for only $419 a month, or shop over 125 vehicles priced under $20,000. Let the amazing team at Ray CDJR help you land the perfect vehicle at the perfect price, because Ray's price promise, the numbers you're hearing now, are the same prices you can expect to shop in store and online. That's because Ray's price promise means no price changing, no add-ons, and no hidden fees. Since they prioritize affordability for their customers, hurry into Ray CDJR today and shop one of the Chicago area's inventories, then drive home with more money in your pocket than you'd expect. So if you're in the market for a new vehicle, then you have to check out the team at Ray Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, because they are the only team we recommend. Visit them today on Route 12 in Fox Lake. For more information, visit Ray CDJR in Fox Lake or raycdjr.com, serving the community since 1983. And finally, quick shout out here to Illinois pork producers. We appreciate all of the support we're getting here at CHGO Bears, and Illinois pork producers is as good as it gets. It's grilling season. Get your pork. People who are active need more protein than the average American. In fact, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and Dietitians of Canada and the American College of Sports Medicine recommend 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day for athletes, depending on training. 1 3-ounce serving of pork provides 23 grams of high-quality protein that can help active individuals build and preserve muscle. The International Society of Sports Nutrition recommends that people who are involved in a general fitness program or who are interested in optimizing their health eat low-fat, high-quality sources of protein, which include lean cuts of pork. Our friend Grillin' with Dad will be here at the offices showing how it's done, cooking up some great recipes on June 19th with Illinois pork. That's in 2 days. Look at it. I almost missed that. Elevate your protein game with lean pork. Thank God I wasn't on vacation for that one. I don't want to miss this day. Elevate your protein game with lean pork, a powerhouse of natural goodness. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois pig farmers. From your sausage and bacon for breakfast to pulled pork or juicy chops hot off the grill. It's an entire season dedicated to pork and the people behind the product, paid for by the Illinois pork producers. Generations of commitment. And I appreciate everyone's commitment to hanging out here tonight for our second CHGO Bears show of the day. This is CHGO Bears After Dark. Please hit that like button while you're hanging out. We have the editor-in-chief of DaBearsBlog, Robert Schmitz joining us here tonight once again here on CHGO Bears, breaking down some different things. All right, you talked about the whole enchilada, and that's what this offense certainly feels like. I saw somebody in the chat saying, hey, I haven't really heard too much of Shane Waldron breakdowns. Obviously we're still early, haven't gotten too many, eyes on them, as far as this offense. We've heard the reports. We've seen a little bit of video footage and content coming out of Hallis Hall from OTAs and minicamp. But we have heard from these guys, and now we know how the chess pieces are going to lay out. So, after getting into it a little more and doing more of the homework that I know you're doing this time of year, what are some of your thoughts going into this season, and how much should I keep my expectations in check for this offense and what their ability will be here in 2024, and specifically what their ability will be early in the season to try to get wins, not just because of the defense, but because of the offense.
So I could use a bunch of flowery language to say this, but I'll just say it in a way, Greg, that I think will get you excited. Shane Waldron's offense ultimately boils down to players, not plays. You've watched for the last 2 years Luke Getsy attempt to engineer plays. And you could see it because if you ever watched any of the All-22, sometimes Fields hold the ball too long. Like, yeah, there's a whole thing about that. I really don't want to get into it. Let's just leave that at the door. But very often, Luke Getsy's route concept, like the primary direct or place that he was supposed to put the football, wouldn't break until the 3 or 3.5 second mark, which is an extremely long time in the world of football. And it, to me, suggested this idea that Getsy was trying to over-engineer football sometimes, where in a complex offense where he felt as if he was able to disguise and manipulate defenses. And hey, at times he was able to get guys open. It kind of worked. But if the players can't run it well, then none of that matters. And it sure seemed as if all kinds of people had that sort of trouble. My favorite story within this is Tyson Bagent going from a decisive quarterback to a quarterback that also was hesitating to pull the trigger over just the course of 4 games, which said to me that within Getsy's offense, a lot of players weren't getting better. They were getting worse and learning to hesitate. Shane Waldron calls his offense, Greg, as this plays for Kenneth Walker. This plays for DK Metcalf. This plays for Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Gino, this plays for you. And the only complicated part about evaluating the Seahawks offense is that about 40% of the play calls were for the offensive line. They were trying to hide it the entire year. So a ton of those plays that I think if you were looking for a direct translation of the Seahawks offense to the Bears, I don't think you're going to get it. Not because the Bears offensive line is amazing, but because the Bears offensive line is adequate, where the Seahawks offensive line was one of the worst in football. And if you asked them to hold on for a medium or deep route concept, you were asking for failure. And no offensive coordinator, as much as I know it's common on football to say the opposite, is ever going to intentionally ask their players to do something that they simply know they can't. Now, the question to me, Greg, at this point becomes, in a players not plays offense, which another way, if you wanted to use a nice little simile, is Getsy is like watching a waltz in his offense, whereas Waldron is much more like watching jazz, where for the first 2 seconds of most plays, you will see the offense trying to do something. After that, it is very clear that Shane Waldron said, "You're a football player. I trust you. Figure it out." And then the Seahawks did. You saw Gino step up in the pocket, work his way out of the pocket, and find scramble drill completions left, right, and center. And to me, it's actually really neat that it worked out this way, because if you look at the way Geno Smith was playing, Caleb should be able to do that and better. Like, the creativity part of Caleb's game fits in with an offense that says, hey, first, you're going to try to look for this basic route over the middle. Then you're going to take a look at the curl on the backside. If none of those are there, roll out to the right and figure it out. You're a football player. I trust you. And this, I think, really squares with what the Bears probably want to do. The question mark that I have most is, can Shane Waldron bring his run game over from Seattle? Because as much as I like DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Walker really shines on that Seahawks tape. That guy is a star. And so, are you going to get the same performance with Bears runners that I like Khalil Herbert, I like DeAndre Swift, or are you almost immediately going to put the weight of this offense on the rookie quarterback? Well, it doesn't sound to me like a brilliant idea, but I bet you we see a whole lot of the same things that the Chargers do with Keenan Allen, tons of option routes. They had the occasional option route for DK, but that's not normally how DK wins. So some of the personnel that we're seeing are just different enough that I think that we would see. I would expect for you, for instance, to see a lot of the play calling semantics change between Seattle and Chicago. But rest assured, Greg, the thought process is going to be the same. It's going to be a focus on players. How do I get Keenan Allen the ball? How do I get DJ Moore the ball? How do I get Roma Dunze the ball?
Yeah,
And from there, you just develop an offense.
I think it's interesting when you talk about this because, everybody has a plan. And then when the bullets start flying, like last year, the Bears had this grandiose plan of how they were going to make Justin Fields, get into the Luke Getsy offense. And by the fourth week, they're like, throw the entire playbook away. We're going to do it how we were doing it last year. And even though this looked like it would work at training camp, it's not working now. We're trying to win games. We don't have time to screw around with this anymore. So early in the season, every offensive coordinator or play caller is going to have a plan. But if your quarterback simply isn't ready for it, which you're not going to know until week 1, which is the terrifying part of this, because you need the Bears to win some games early on. Right out the gate, a must win, in my opinion, with Tennessee at home, a winnable game. That's a home game on your schedule. When you look at the second half of the season, I think a lot of those games early on that the Bears, on paper look like they should win. You can't blow them. It's going to make it even harder in the second half of the season. So that being said, depending on how quickly Caleb Williams is processing everything, would Khalil Herbert in the early portion of the season, you get DeAndre Swift, this new toy, you want to use him. But at the end of the day, if your offense isn't ready for DeAndre Swift, who's more of a pass catching running back, but you get under the I formation, because that was something we did see a lot with Shane Waldron's offense last year. They would get in the I formation, run the stretch zone, and that's why they kept the run game coordinator and the offensive line coach here, Chris Morgan, because they wanted to keep this run game the way it's been the last couple of years, which has been successful, which has been with Khalil Herbert. He's been here the longest.
He's a beast when he runs the ball.
And he is a beast. He's one of the best, back cutting, finding that hole on the backside, and boom, he's gone for 30 yards. So to me, I think Khalil Herbert is somebody that's starting to become forgotten a bit, and then could be somebody early in the season that could be the person that gets you across that early hurdle to where it starts to slow down for Caleb in weeks 4 or 5.
The interesting thing to me, Greg, is I think a lot of football fans need to realize how QB friendly a lot of option routes can be. Where, just to use an example, Greg, you obviously know, that in a screen, you're not going to read the field. You're going to read it pre-snap, but then the moment you snap the ball, you're throwing to one guy. A lot of option routes, especially for guys like Keenan Allen, work pretty much the same, where you aren't going to throw to anybody else. You're throwing to 13. You're just waiting for him to turn back and look at you. A lot of times that's the cue. And then you throw to wherever he is.
And also both have to be on the same page of recognizing what the leverage is.
Because sometimes, because it especially at the NFL level, like you're saying, a lot of times you'll try to throw that with anticipation. But especially when you talk about a rookie quarterback, it's not mandatory to throw it with anticipation when you've got Caleb Williams' arm. Instead, you can just wait for him to turn his shoulders and then just throw and not expect to get any yards after catch. But Greg, it's Keenan Allen. He's not breaking a tackle. Love him. That's just not in his bag. Right. So I wonder if that's one of the plans that the Bears have to try to take some of the mental load off Caleb Williams without having to be a ground and pound team in response. Does that make sense? This would be an easy way, just to use an example, for Caleb to potentially throw for over 200 yards in his first start without having to carry a ton of mental weight either. where
True.
you give him a couple of limited reads to get his feet wet with, but most of the planning comes down to, hey, if you throw a pick, that's on Keenan Allen, and he knows that. And he's handled this before with Justin Herbert, who he made look like an absolute star. And I think, what is it? Drew Black in the chat mentioned this, that I thought this was a really good question, talking about how it felt as if last year Getsy and Fields had a vision for the offense that didn't come together. I agree, especially after what happened with Tampa. It felt as if Fields and Getsy's plan fell apart. And whenever these professional people, Greg, you just talked about this, whenever you have to go back to the drawing board, you are 10 planning weeks behind everybody else who did not yet have to forfeit what their offensive plan is. And that's
Right.
one thing that it seems like over 2 years in Seattle, I've seen with Waldron, is that it seems as if, Greg, he is a simple ideas taught well kind of coach. We'll see if that happens in Chicago. But Geno Smith plays like he knows where to put the ball, which is not something we saw during his time with the Jets. And so to me, if you see Caleb Williams get to a point where he looks like he's confident and comfortable knowing, okay, this is the look we're looking at, I want to try to put the ball here. Coach says I need to play fast. Let me play fast. Loosen up on how you're going to make this check so that you can play quickly through that. It feels so player centric because the Seattle Seahawks moved and operated at NFL speed. Whereas it felt as if the Bears were so bogged down in getting the landmark right and trying to anticipate that throw that then you'd see Fields throw it into the wrong look because he was so focused on throwing with anticipation on this play.
Yep.
They didn't read it out. And so I don't know exactly how this is going to work. You're talking about a rookie quarterback. This is one of the harder things I think to predict in the sport. But like you're talking about, I can't help but look and see Waldron as a good teacher, that it remains to be seen whether he is an amazing offensive mind, but it's always hard to work around an offensive line. We saw for years with Matt Nagy, the Bears put out a bunch of horrible offensive lines, and we would say to each other, Greg, well, what are you really going to do with an offensive line this bad? In the Seahawks case, put up a top 10 offense. So there's something to be said there. I'm not trying to tell everybody to pave the streets with gold wherever he walks, but standards have been so low in Chicago that it might be easier for him to achieve something really meaningful given just how good the offensive personnel is right now than people think. Does that make sense?
Yep. 100%. Jordan Silvera is here in the chat and he's pushing back a little bit saying follow the money. Swift is your lead guy and Herbert is more similar to Swift than the change of pace back in Roshan. As such, Herbert is likely RB2 at best, most likely RB3. And I think in an ideal world, that's how they're going to want it, right? I mean, they didn't bring in DeAndre Swift for no reason. It's not going to be. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not a running back by committee. You always go with the hot hand, but what opportunities could Khalil Herbert get early on to be able to take some carries away would be interesting to see how that breaks out. And it's not as if DeAndre Swift is only a pass catching back. He can run the ball as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. I'm just saying, I've always been a Khalil Herbert guy since his rookie year. I've always liked Khalil, and I kind of feel like everybody's kind of just pushing him off. Even people were even putting him on the trade block like a month ago. And I'm kind of sitting there going, hey, maybe he has an opportunity to, help out early on when I feel like the run game is going to be a big focal point to give Caleb Williams that smooth transition into the NFL and baby step his way from, the passing game, making the easy, simple completions, moving the chains to becoming the explosive offense we all hope this is for the next 10 years. And then I think the other aspect, and you brought this up earlier in the show when you talked about Cole Kmet, obviously we all know this is a cliche line in football, but the tight end is your quarterback's best friend. Well, not only do they have Cole Kmet, who statistically has been one of the better tight ends over the past 2 years in an offense that has struggled at times. Now you add Gerald Everett, a pass catching tight end who can make some plays. We've seen him already here in some of these highlights out of OTAs, making some nice catches from Caleb Williams. So, I also think that's going to be paramount early in the year to get Caleb Williams comfortable with throwing over the middle of the field because, everybody can make the throws to the sidelines because you have that safety valve. If you long shot it, it goes out of bounds. You've got, the boundaries to protect you a little bit. But when you throw over the middle of the field, you've got to be able to trust your eyes. You've got to be able to trust your instincts. And you also got to have the arm talent to make sure this isn't getting picked off. And, there's going to be a lot of disguised coverages and a lot of things that Caleb Williams hasn't seen. We saw early in Justin's career, that rookie year, when the linebacker baited him for the pick six. I believe it was against San Francisco. Was that
Cincinnati?
Cincinnati. That's right. And yeah, and because the Bears had that game in the bag, and then all of a sudden Cincinnati, tricked them. That happens to rookie quarterbacks. That could very well happen to Caleb Williams. So these tight ends, long-winded, setup here for you, Robert, but these tight ends are going to be paramount for Caleb Williams here, especially early in the season, to get him comfortable.
I think so. I mean, especially because we really don't know. I don't know how the Bears are going to set up their formations so that they can try to crack open the middle of the field, because they've got such dangerous outside receivers that I would imagine teams are going to spend a couple extra resources trying to take those sidelines away, because if you don't, I mean, that's life on easy mode for a quarterback. What, you're going to put a couple balls up to Rome Odunze and DJ Moore? Like, if it's me, what I want to take away from a guy like Caleb Williams, a rookie quarterback who I know has a live arm, is the Bears' ability to just send Rome Odunze and DJ Moore both on post routes, such that you take a single high safety and he walks away with Rome Odunze, and then DJ Moore just has to beat an outside corner into the open middle of the field. That is a touchdown waiting to happen. We can't let that happen. If I'm a defensive coordinator, the rookie's going to have to make 12 to 14 plays to get into the end zone, at least 7, as opposed to me ever giving him a free 1.
Yep.
But the Bears personnel puts you in position like I didn't even get a chance yet to insert into the show that I'm really interested to see what Rome brings to the table, because I can't shake the feeling that his college film is lying to me, because the college game is a little different than the NFL game. NFL is much more focused on physicality, whereas college is so wide open and spread out that it places an emphasis on speed and quickness. And yet you see a bunch of bigger physical outside receivers dominate in college, or dominate in the pros, when in college they were fine. George Pickens is probably my favorite example for this, where he hasn't missed a beat in Pittsburgh, and he's been more than anybody thought he was going to be coming out of college, because he was an outside dominant physical threat. And Rome is that. So when it comes to his physicality and his speed, I wonder if we're going to see more burst out of Rome, because it looked as if sometimes you would see, you can go back and watch this, Greg, I bet you'll see it too, that as soon as Rome hit about 20 yards off the ball, he throttled down. I don't know if Penix couldn't get the ball out there, or if the Washington offense just didn't want him to run, or for whatever reason, but that's going to be a Caleb Williams bread and butter that I would love to see happen. Bringing it back to the tight ends and running backs, I do think that there's plenty of food on the table here for Khalil Herbert taking the Deontay Foreman carries, even if DeAndre Swift is the lead running back. Swift says to me that they want to throw the ball a lot, but if there's one big franchise-wide criticism I want to just lay on Chicago, Greg, Chicago has been a team that has so rarely had any depth that the moment that the Bears have a legitimate starter that isn't starting, Bears fans think they should trade him. Hold on to Jack Sanborn. Keep Khalil Herbert. Keep, Jalen Jones can kind of play a little on at outside corner. Depth is a good thing. We need depth.
And earlier in the show, and we'll bring this back, and we do have a super chat I want to get to, but Eric Bochan brought up when we were talking about the safeties, and you're talking about depth right here. I wonder if Jonathan Owens sees more time than people think and plays a hybrid safety linebacker and cuts into some of Jack Sanborn's time. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I honestly wouldn't. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens, if only because the Bears have this hybrid safety linebacker in Jaquan Brisker. But I like Owens. It's not a criticism on Owens. It's just that I think that the base Bears personnel that they have make a lot of sense for what they want to do. The question would be, who would Owens replace? Would Owens be pulling off Kyler Gordon? Because I get that, but the Bears don't need to be that big on the field. If anything, the league is continuing to try to get smaller. So as opposed to having 3 safeties, you want to sit in nickel as often as you can. It's not to say anything about Owens, because in all likelihood, look, I hate to say this, in all likelihood, Brisker's probably going to miss some time. He had enough struggles with injury last year that to pretend that's not maybe looming feels unrealistic. So it won't surprise me if Owens is going to
Well,
get
and
his
the
number
way
called.
that he plays, and
Mhm.
when you talk about depth in the secondary, like who's another guy that people just have completely stopped talking about, Terrell Smith.
Right.
He that I really enjoyed watching his progression throughout the year, but now that this secondary is set the way it is, he's kind of the side piece. But that depth, I mean, a couple years ago,
You need it.
with right, you 100% need it, because like 2 years ago, when Enkeel Harry and all these different, we brought in Robert Tunyon, and we bring in all these different guys, and we start trying to figure out the pathway for the Bears to win 9 games. And I'm sitting over here on Meatball
Yep.
Island last year, same thing. Once you start bumping those players down that were second on your depth chart to third on your depth chart, now all of a sudden you've got a team that has a chance, because you need depth across the board, from a talent standpoint, fatigue throughout the game, and then obviously from an injury standpoint. And it feels like, with the exception of obviously pass rusher, which everybody's got their eye on right now, that everybody feels like and they should add more to that pass rushing, prowess there on defense. But outside of that, it does feel like they have very good depth at the rest of their position groups. And I know that's kind of like, you don't want to jinx it, and we always do overrate. Certainly I do. I always overrate our talent because I'm so keyed in on them, but it does feel a little more legitimate to say that this time around.
That's what I think makes the Bears so potentially dangerous next year in terms of win-loss. I mean, not only is the schedule soft enough where it's very possible the Bears could go on some runs that'll have Chicago buzzing. It'll have, honestly, the NFL landscape buzzing, because Bears fan, just so that we're on the same page, the Bears NFL rookie touchdown record is 11 touchdowns. The Bears NFL rookie passing record is 2,150 yards. These could, not saying they will, could be accomplished by October, November. And so at that point, you've already got heads.
At that point, I will be running down Lakeshore Drive naked.
And you say that, I'm going to run down. I will fly to Lakeshore Drive to run down it naked if in 17 games Caleb Williams throws for 4,000 yards, which isn't even this titanic achievement. This is something that happens 10 to 15 times every year, but a Chicago quarterback's never done it. And if he set the passing record in his first year, holy moly, people are going to freak out. I say all of this because the funny part is, Greg, let me ask you a question you don't want to answer, but I want to ask you anyways. Right? Let's say Tyson Bagent had to start 9 games this season. How many of them do you think he wins with this roster?
Well, what part of the season is it? Early in the season, I think they could win 5 games. I think there's 5 games out of those first 9 that they could win because their defense is so good and the talent they have around them. And Tyson Bagent, isn't afraid to rip it. Obviously, think he's got some arm strength issues and stuff, but and yes, I do threaten to run down Lakeshore Drive naked no matter what happens. I do make those threats, including driving into Lake Michigan for cause of my sports depression. So we all understand these are hollow threats that I make, and that's probably a good thing. But the second half of the season, though, going back to your question, it's going to be a little harder to churn out some wins. But they could beat the Vikings.
For sure. I mean, I would even say over the course of the season, if Tyson starts all 17 games, I would expect the Bears to maybe win 7 or 8 of them. But that speaks to how much I like the rest of the roster. And that's the point
and even the quarterback position. I mean, Tyson Bagent, comes in last year, wins real NFL football games, comes in and starts in the middle of the year, goes 2-2. He's now your backup. You've got Austin Reed, now another developmental quarterback coming in behind him. This was the dream that Ryan Pace promised us that never actually happened.
Yeah.
Developing quarterbacks.
You're kind of deep.
Right. Now all of a sudden they've got some intriguing options. So, I wouldn't feel terrible if Tyson Bagent has to come in for a spot start here or there, especially with the talent they have around them and the confidence that he plays with. And now a year under his belt to understand the speed of the game and the process a little more. Like you said, like Just
And
across the board, there's just a lot to be excited about. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got to this. $20 super chat from Seth Crane. Appreciate your support, Seth, here on CHGO Bears After Dark. He said, first he said that I'm mad at him for saying I needed a new barber during the 12 o'clock show today. I'm not mad at you. I do not need a new barber because, as you can see, I do not have hair. Drew Black says in the chat that I need to shave my eyebrows to complete the look. So I don't know. I know that Carm would probably have a lot of fun with that. But back to the super chat, $20 super chat from Seth Crane. Hey, y'all, sorry if this was discussed on any other pods, but have you talked about the Athletics reported Getsy's issues in OTAs with their quarterbacks? How has the OTAs and minicamp compared to with Getsy the last 2 years? I did hear about the report from Getsy. I did see the report. Bears Twitter was pushing it around that Getsy's struggling at OTAs. Did you go any more in depth to that? Because all I did was headline read and then went back to my pina colada in Florida. I can speak to how the OTAs and minicamp went for Getsy the last years, but I can't speak to what's going on in Raiders Nation.
so I did pull it up because as he mentioned it, I was like, are there issues? That's hilarious. And so I went and looked it up. And it's funny, Seth, because we talked earlier about how Getsy over designs his offense in a lot of cases. And it sounds as if Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew are struggling with very similar premises. Now, it doesn't help anything that the Raiders wide receivers are not especially amazing. I mean, I know we're talking about Devontae Adams, but we're talking about a slightly older Devontae Adams than he has been. But even so, I mean, if Getsy, we kind of saw this with Nagy, I feel like, Greg, where a lot of coaches, they hit the position ready to show their best stuff. And if they encounter major hurdles or problems down the road, it's almost like they start to devolve, right? Because this is Getsy's adjustment. This is Getsy trying to fix what went wrong in Chicago. And if now he's trying to basically over-design everything to the extreme, I wonder if it's just too much for the quarterback to wear. And at the end of the day, anything your quarterback can't execute isn't a play worth running, because if you can't execute it, then it won't work as called. But we're not there. We don't know.
And it's early for them to install all this stuff. And I do think Aiden O'Connell is a good fit for Luke Getsy. He wants guys that are going to get the ball out quick. And if you watch Aiden O'Connell like I did at Purdue, he's very good at that. Last year, he played very well in his rookie season. So I do think there's a bit of a fit there. And I think Gardner Minshew is a good type of quarterback for Aiden to look to. I'm assuming that, I honestly don't know because I'm not following Raiders Nation, but I'm assuming they're going to start Gardner Minshew. But I honestly don't know. We'll have to just wait and see how that all shakes out. But it will be an indicator, how successful they are or aren't with the Raiders to like what was going on here. I think some people will peel back that onion a little bit just to get a little more clarity on how last year went. But at the end of the day, I think Luke Getsy would be the first to tell you, like, their offenses through the 3 years of Justin Fields did improve. Now, they did not meet the level of improvement enough for the front office to A, keep Luke Getsy, or B, keep Justin Fields. But they did, by definition and by the statistics, improve from year 1 to year 2 to year 3. Obviously Justin Fields had his flaws, and quite frankly, so did Luke Getsy, and which is why I fired him 5 times on our post-game shows last year, because like we talked about earlier in the season or earlier here in this show, there's nothing I can't stand more than when an offensive coordinator can't adjust. And don't come to the podium talking about execution. I want to hear about your adjustments, because that is the benchmark of a great play caller. And so you're sitting here telling me, well, I called the play, this guy's open, and this guy's not blocking, or this guy didn't make the pass, this guy didn't read the field, and they're not executing, so it's not my fault. No, you've got to understand what your players are, what the limitations they have, what the strengths they have, and play to those. Mike Martz was a great play caller with the Rams, won a Super Bowl, comes to the Bears, tries to run the Rams offense, and it goes to shit, to the point where Jay Cutler's telling him, well, tell Mike Martz, fuck you. We're not doing another 7-step drop because I'm going to get buried here at the 50-yard line for the 12th time tonight. So, even the greatest play callers of all time, sometimes can't get out of their own way because they only understand one way to call things. Matt Nagy's another example of that. And to me, the best play callers of all time can adjust to the players they have on their roster. So there's my spiel.
It's funny because there's a 5-letter word that defines the last 5 years of Chicago, I guess 4 years of Chicago offense, and that is a lack of trust. You could see it all over the place, whether it's on 3rd and 6, Luke Getsy would call a run up the middle, whether it's Nick Foles and Matt Nagy arguing with each other on the sidelines, whether it's Justin Fields coming out and saying, they're giving me too much to do, I want to play my game. Like, we've seen this all throughout both the numbers and the personalities in the locker rooms, that the Bears offensive staff and the Bears offensive players do not trust each other when the chips are on the table. And my hope is that we are sitting here in a year from now, Greg, and you're telling me how amazing Shane Waldron is, because he did all the things you never saw Getsy do. And I hope I get to say back that I don't know if it's Waldron doing anything specific other than that he trusts his players and that his players are worth trusting. It's not sensible to trust Dante Pettis to come up with that huge play for you. Sometimes it's been a personnel problem for the Bears.
Yep.
Other times it's been a coaching issue where you have to trust that guy and you have to live or die with what he does, because that's who you got. And at the end of the day, if you don't trust him, you're worse off. The Bears have built an offense that is trustworthy, and they have a coach that has a history of trusting his players.
Well,
this thing has a chance to mesh beautifully.
And they've built a team and an offense, but a team that has a larger margin of error is the hope, because every team is going to make errors. But if your margin of error is bigger because of the talent on your roster, then you can overcome some of the mistakes you're going to make throughout the game. The other team gets paid too. So you're going to make mistakes, but can you overcome them? Can your margin of error be so wide that you win despite making a few mistakes and get to a point where you get hot and now all of a sudden you're not making any mistakes and you're just kicking teams' asses? So the Bears just didn't have a margin of error, and anytime they made a mistake, it would get microscoped, and it would be the reason they'd lose time and time again. You could go back and look at what led to the Bears getting the number 1 pick over the last 2 years. And there was the smallest margins that 2 years ago, Justin Fields runs for, 1,500 yards. They could have won 7 of those games, and they wouldn't had Caleb Williams or the chance at the number 1 pick, so it's funny how things kind of unfold the way they do. And so now this year, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. It's exciting. I know we've got a lot more to get into as the summer progresses. We're 4 weeks away. I saw somebody put it here in the chat that said, let me see if I can find this. Robert Lee says, Bears PSA, 39 days to first day of training camp practice, open to the public, 45 days to the Hall of Fame game, 50 days to the premiere of Hard Knocks. So it's coming quick, man. And 4th of July is shimmied right in between all of that. Before you know it, we're going to have boots on the ground here at Hallis Hall. So go ahead, Robert, if you got a few
I need
things.
you to tell me something when you go to Hallis Hall. Okay.
You got it.
So we survived the Nagy years, where it seemed as if the only thing they knew how to run was a curl and the occasional option route that saw slants happen. Then last 3 years, Justin Fields wouldn't throw any of the slants. I hate hearing from people, because it's not that you're wrong. It's just a sadder story than that Getsy pulled the slants out of the playbook. Yeah, he did, especially late in 2023, because early in 2023 and 2022, Fields wouldn't throw an open slant unless it was like wide open. So I need you to tell me in OTAs, the first couple slants you see, that they're still in there. That's something I'm dying to know, because if you put DJ Moore and Keenan Allen on double slants, I have to think they're going to be open a lot. And for a rookie quarterback, that would be a great way to access that middle of the field.
Yep, 100%. Some drags and some slants. Those are the things that, and your quarterback's got to be comfortable, having that touch and timing to get it over the defensive line. We saw a lot of batted balls in practices the last couple years. So, when you're thrown over to the middle of the field, there's a lot of traffic. You got to fit it through. You got to have that confidence, timing, rhythm, touch, all of that comes into play. So I'm excited to see Caleb Williams in person making those plays, and I will definitely report back to you. And then obviously to me, watching those 7-on-7s last year, Justin Fields would complete 14 of 15 on some of those sessions, but they were all check downs. They were all, some of them, I thought there was plenty of times where he was getting it out on time, but at some point you have to be able to push the seams, push the ball downfield in 7-on-7s. It's not just a drill to throw the quick out or the quick slant. You gotta be able to read it all. You don't have a pass rush there, and it should be 1-2, bam, out of your hand. And it shouldn't just be over the middle down, in a check down. It should be down the field at times. So some of the biggest bombs I ever saw at camp were in 7-on-7s, and we weren't seeing those last year. So I know Shane Waldron is somebody that certainly likes to stretch the field. Like you said, hey, this one's going to DK Metcalf. So now it's, hey, this one's going to Rome Odunze. This one's going to DJ Moore. So I want to see some of that as well, and we will certainly be getting to all of that here. We got a few more starred comments here that I wanted to chime in on. Drew Black, when we were talking about Jaquan Brisker, he was saying Brisker has played 15 games both the last 2 seasons. It seems like less because the guy lives in the blue tent, in the medical tent, and he's 100% right. He, if you go look, he's played in a bunch of the games, but yeah, every other series it feels like he's got to be checked out because of the physicality that he plays with. So this is why depth is important, because you're not going to be able to completely pull that from the way that Jaquan Brisker plays. Drew Black also said, my prediction for Waldron's offense, we are going to throw the ball way more than we think. And it is going to be interesting. I think a lot of us are, trying to be conscientious of how overhyped we get for early. So we're prefacing everything, and we're hedging, and we're saying, they're going to play it safe early on. But I've always said, all right, I can be fair and try to have realistic expectations, even though I'm going to be completely overhyped and so excited for the season and find my way to seeing this team to win 13 games before the season even starts. But I can also try to be realistic if it doesn't happen exactly how I want as the season plays out, especially early on, even though my emotions are going to be running high because I just want this team to be good so bad. But at the same time, I'm not going to put a limitation on what the capabilities of this team will be. Everybody's like, oh, well, this year, they'll only win X games and maybe they'll be a fringe playoff team. And then next year will be the year they go for it. Who's to say? They could be one of the hottest teams in football by the end of the year. And it's all about momentum at the end of the day. Russell Wilson, they got to the playoffs their first year. They won a playoff game. And then in the second season, I believe, is when they won a Super Bowl, putting that Legion of Boom and, Marshawn Lynch around Russell Wilson. Well, hey, Seahawks were on fire his rookie year, and they lost a tough game in the playoffs, but they could have kept that run going. Jordan Love last year, I know he wasn't a rookie, but it was his first year as a starter. They were rolling. They could have easily gotten to the Super Bowl last year. So, football is a game of inches. You don't win, so be it. But I'm not putting a cap on what the potential of this team will be, while also trying to remind myself to, keep my emotions to a certain check because of the expectations I do have, which are always sitting on Meatball Island.
That's where I think this gets so hard, Greg, is that on one hand, you're trying to rationalize, how do I think this positively about a team with a rookie quarterback? Betting on all these things for a rookie quarterback is like a football cardinal sin. You can't expect a rookie quarterback to win a playoff game. What are you doing? But on the other hand, like Drew Black is saying, the Bears' 3 best offensive players are receivers. I mean, besides the quarterback, like quarterback aside, if they're not throwing the ball, what's the point of having them? And so they're going to throw the ball. It's just a matter of how. It's just a matter of when. It's a matter of how are they going to try to execute that. I bet we'll see a lot of throw throwing the ball like an extension of the run game kinds of things. You've got a quarterback with the lightning quick release. Good. That means you can get the ball out to the sideline that much faster for a wide receiver bubble screen, especially because where things used to be a little more obvious with who was getting the ball, because it was obvious when the Bears had EQ like lined up that they were going to have him block for somebody. Now you can put Rome out there with DJ Moore. It is not a given that that's a wide receiver screen, and you can't defend it like it is. But all of this soups up to say, I think, Greg, like you're talking about, look, expectations wise, I hope that I would expect the Bears win 8 games, but I hope they win a playoff game because I think that that's well within reach if things break well for them. The hope here, again, hope would be a Super Bowl next year. That's the contention. Right. Where you pour one more offseason into this thing, and then you just push this into hyperdrive and try to take the whole thing home. But I don't like when we start to expect true greatness. Only one team wins the Super Bowl every year, and 55% of the time it's Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. So the idea that it's going to be the Bears and Caleb Williams in any given year is a lot to ask. But man, the pieces feel like they're falling into place. There's one player on this team that can't get hurt, and he's big and long, and I won't say his name or his number because I feel like I'd be willing it into existence. So the moment that the Bears can get some D-line insurance, the better, because that's really the only thing I think that could undo any part of this team. You know what I mean?
Yep. And when you talk about that depth being important, I think Poles knows that. I think worst case scenario, maybe there's a better way of saying that because I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Yannick Ngakoue, but I do think worst case scenario is they do bring back Yannick Ngakoue. There's a familiarity there. Probably get him a little cheaper than you did last year. He's still sitting there on the market, familiarity with this defense already adds to the depth. Then, and also a guy that I think could be a good mentor to a guy like Austin Booker. Obviously Montez Sweat's already doing that as well. So it'll be fun to watch all this unfold. So much to talk about. Stephen D here in the chat said, I don't know about who needs to have a bigger year, but Flus has more to prove as a head coach than Waldron as an OC. And I do think I agree. Like, well, if Waldron's role might be more important because of how crucial it is for the Bears to not screw up the development of this rookie quarterback and this prospect that, once in a lifetime type of generational talent quarterback, and how many different times we've failed quarterbacks of the past with, in the, not too distant future of Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. Now we're giving this a third shot, and this being a first year of an offense. I think it is Waldron is the answer of his job here this year and over the next 4 years is more important. But I think Flus has more to prove this year. Waldron will get a little more of a leash of allowance and excuse making if things aren't exactly perfect because of what we were just talking about, where we're going to try to rationalize our expectations if they weren't met. Well, this, and this, and everything's going to be okay because next year, you know what I mean? Like, that's just what we do as fans. Flus, if he has some of the similar reasons the Bears don't win 3 or 4 games because of situational play calling or dropping a defensive tackle into coverage to cover a tight end on a crucial third and long, got to get off the field moment, or, some of those situational play calling, even on offense, where they can't decide how they want to run the ball, whether it's the quarterback push, or whatever they're going to, the Cole Kmet squeeze, whatever they're deciding to do, those things also fall on Matt Eberflus as well. So I agree with Stephen D here in the chat. Eric Beauchamp finishes it off and says, hope you had a great vacation. Glad you're back. I appreciate that, Eric. It has knocking off the rust here tonight. That's why we went a little over here on CHGO Bears After Dark. I'll be back in studio tomorrow with the guys. Henry Melton, former Chicago Bear, former defensive tackle here in Chicago, going to be in studio with us, former Texas Longhorn. So it'll be fun to talk to Henry Melton. Robert Schmitz joined us here once again here tonight, editor-in-chief at DaBearsBlog. Make sure you follow him at Robert K. Schmitz on Twitter. He does a lot of great stuff. They do Spaces, him and Jeff Hughes over at DaBearsBlog. I always enjoy his perspective. It's a unique perspective on the team and the game that we love here with the Bears and football. And, I enjoy your guys' interactions, listening to you guys talk in Spaces. I think you guys bring something different to the table. And then obviously you do some great video breakdowns that always shine more light on this team and give us a better understanding of what we're looking at. And what I like about you, Robert, is you're always learning, you're always doing your homework, and you show your homework. And that doesn't mean you're getting all A pluses, but you're doing your homework, you're showing what you're trying to learn. You've even had guys like Kurt Warner that are correcting your homework. And that's a great thing. But when we watch those as fans, because a lot of us aren't doing the homework, you're putting in the time. And then when we see interactions like that, where there's a good conversation of actual X's and O's, that is for a lot of meatballs like me, way over our head in terms of our understanding of the game, you help us along that way. So we appreciate the service that you bring here to Bears Twitter and Bears social media and Bears podcasting in general.
Anytime. It's a joy. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Is there anything else you want to plug before you take off? Any other projects you have coming up here? I know it's summertime, so we're all trying to relax before the season starts, and we go from literally July 20th till next year's draft without a day off.
Right. It's prep season. So it's watch film, get stuff ready, and figure out life outside of this so that you're ready for the season. I don't know. Check every day for DBB. Bear With Us podcast. Nick and I are killing it as far as trying to bring you something that's film focused with also analytical. Our latest episode is us basically talking about the most positive possible scenarios for the Bears, where I think, Greg, the part we didn't talk about is that the Bears might be catching the league in a downturn because all the best quarterbacks just got that much more expensive and their contracts kick in over the next 2 to 3 years. So what does that mean for the Bears, given it's the Bears with Caleb Williams and the Jags with Trevor Lawrence? They're the only two real quarterbacks aside from CJ Stroud that have the rookie window to take advantage of. I don't know, but we'll see. Also, if Jordan Love gets a $55 million bag per year, what are you going to think?
I'm going to love it. I fully support. Hey, it's tongue in cheek, but it will hurt their roster building if they have to pay Jordan Love. And it's off of 1 year. It's really off of the second half of the season where he was as good as any quarterback in the league. But at the same time, if I'm a Packer fan, I want them to pay him.
Yes.
I'm not letting him walk. I'm going to trust my eyes from what I see as a fan. And I'm just trying to put on my fake. I'm not even going to say it because I would never put on a cheese head, but I'm just saying, just trying to be objective and looking at what they're doing. He has the right look. He has the right rhythm and feel in the pocket, the arm angles, the arm action, the arm talent. He's got a lot of moxie, and I personally, it's a risk. Everything's a risk. You're rolling the dice. There's a little bit of an unknown as far as the entirety of his career going forward, but if I'm the Packers, I'm paying him. You can't let any kind of quarterback like that walk. He's very talented, but at the same time, I hope they pay him $70 million a year. And
reminds me of the Goff thing. It's not a choice that you're allowed to make another option on, right? You can't realistically move on from Jared Goff if you're Detroit. This guy got you your first playoff win in years. Maybe, it's certainly in my lifetime, which is a lot to say. On Jordan Love, he gave you too much. You can't not pay him. And if you're Jordan Love's agent, you're not betting it on another year. Right. So another deal is coming. That's just a given. Yep. And the Packers have been good enough that we can't say. It's funny, right? We saw a comment just in here, Greg, that said, well, for starters, beating the Packers would be great when talking about Matt Eberflus. That's the gold standard. There are a lot of teams that the Bears can beat that aren't Green Bay, and they could still get swept by Green Bay in the season series.
Yeah.
It's too bad that Green Bay is as good at staying good as they are. But if anything, I appreciate the challenge, because if the Packers are really never going to slump, Greg, that means beating them is still going to have meaning when eventually the Bears win 6 in a row.
Right. Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I picked the Bears to win 13 games when the schedule first released. I'm going to have my official pick before the season starts. Once the rosters are completely set and we're actually at the season, that's Like, let me have my meatball moment on schedule release night. We all get overexcited. But I did have them losing both games to Green Bay. So there you go. So, I definitely respect what Green Bay's doing. That's why I'm always chanting Green Bay sucks, because they do. Everybody's like rent free. Yeah, it is. They do live rent free in my head, because I really, really hate them, and I'd really like to beat them once in my life. Drew Black giving you the sign off here, saying Rob and Nick Whalen are awesome.
Thank you, Drew.
So we all here on the Bears Nation appreciate your work, and I appreciate all your time here tonight. Almost made it to an hour and a half, so you knew this one was going to go a little long. I hadn't talked for 2 weeks on these airwaves here on CHGO Bears, so you knew you're going to hear a little bit tonight. And Robert, I appreciate you coming on, especially on short notice. Corey will be back. Corey Wooten will be back here next week, ladies and gentlemen. But I appreciate you, Robert, coming on and chopping it up and talking some Bears here tonight.
Love it, man. Thanks so much. Check with you soon.
Yes, sir. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps things up for tonight. Go enjoy your baseball and your NBA finals if you aren't already. And like I said, we'll be back tomorrow at 12 p.m. Central with Henry Melton in studio, former Chicago Bear. Excited to talk to him. So make sure you tune in. We'll see you then. And always, bear down.
We all silly like the mail.